Good evening, everyone. If I could have everyone take their seat now, please. Good evening. This meeting is being called to order at 6:30. I'm Deputy Mayor Pearson, and I will be chairing tonight's council meeting as Mayor Hankivsky is unable to attend as she is attending her son's graduation in the UK. I'll also note that Councillor Mink is unable to attend tonight and has sent in her regrets. Before we begin, I would like to provide a few reminders. Assisted listening devices are available for anyone who may need that during tonight's meeting. Please see the Deputy Clerk over there, who can help you sign one out and get you all set up. We kindly ask that all the devices be returned at the end of the meeting or before you leave so that they can be collected and made available for future use. If you do not return them, then the Deputy Clerk is going to chase you down. Please also note that the washrooms are located just down the hallway to the left, and in the event of an emergency, residents are asked to exit in an orderly fashion using the stairs located just outside council chambers. Should the staircase be unavailable, residents are asked to proceed down the fire escape located at the back of council chambers. If assistance is required, please see our staff. Now please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Moving on to our land acknowledgement, the Municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe traditional territories covered by the Williams Treaty. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and the waters in which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit towards actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, Inuit peoples, especially those that make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to pecuniary interest, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Noting that none were received at a time. Seeing none. Announcements, updates, and recognitions. You may have noticed outside that spring is kind of here. So we've had this beautiful weather, so I just thought I would highlight the fact that with this beautiful weather, frequently you will see kids out playing, which is a wonderful thing. So I just thought I would highlight to pay attention while you're driving around and make sure that you're slowing down in our residential areas to make sure that we're keeping all of our kids safe. On Saturday, many members of council were in attendance for Your Good Man, Charlie Brown at the Capitol Theatre. I found it to be a wonderful performance, and I highly recommend getting some tickets and enjoying a beautiful evening out in Port Hope. On Thursday, May 21st at 10 a.m. at Office Links, I will be at the Chamber Connect event, where I'll be joined with MP Philip Lawrence and MPP Minister David Piccini, and you can hear what's happening in all three tiers of government. Next week, I'll be doing a taping of Municipal Matters for Your TV, and that'll be an opportunity to hear us talk about Port Hope, and I always think that that's incredible. On Saturday, May 23rd, we'll be celebrating and honoring the Ladies Auxiliary Branch 30 for their 70th anniversary. That is 70 years of supporting the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 30. Now, something that people may have missed, but on Friday, May 1st, it was TCS. It was their 161st birthday. You know, TCS was founded in 1865 by Reverend William A. Johnson and then moved to Port Hope 3 years later. It started off as a school of just 9, and now it's a bustling 100-acre campus of nearly 600 young people. And now I've got some amazing news. Our very own fire chief, Chief Williams, will be awarded the Fire Chief of the Year Award, and that is from the Ontario Municipal Fire Prevention Officers Association. So congratulations to Chief Williams. Do any members of council have any announcements or updates that they would like to share? Councillor Holloway-Woodwani.
Thank you. This is an announcement that the morning of Saturday, May 30th, Councillor Todd and I, on behalf of the municipality, will be hosting a delegation from the Governor General's Leadership Conference who are coming. There are leaders from across Canada who are coming to Port Hope and other local municipalities to check out what's cool and innovative and unique about our communities. So we'll be doing a tour of the downtown and introducing them to some of the most innovative and unique things about our community.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other members of council? Seeing none, moving on to reports from our youth councillors. So I now welcome our youth councillors, Emily Mountjoy and Leah Ferguson, to present us with their report to council. And we'll start off with Emily and then move on to Leah.
Good evening, Council. Since the last meeting in April, I've been very busy. I was very fortunate to be able to speak at the Civic Awards presentation. It was a very memorable night filled with celebration. I had a lot of fun helping to present the awards to Council and getting to see how happy each recipient was. I truly am grateful to have been invited, and I look forward to attending next year. The first week of May was a very important week for youth, National Youth Week. I know that I really enjoyed it, and I really hope everyone else did as well. There were some really fun activities hosted at the Port Hope Rec Center. My favorite part was probably the escape room they had set up there. I hope we get more people there next year and have a lot of fun with it. Every year, the first Sunday of May represents the Battle of the Atlantic. Similar to Remembrance Day, it's recognized to honor the members of the Navy who helped serve our country while at war. I stood on guard at the Port Hope Cenotaph to help show my respect for the veterans. And I'm really looking forward to summer weather we've been enjoying. I really hope it stays this bright and sunny for quite a while. I know this was mentioned, but I just want to say how important it is. That with the weather being so nice means a lot more kids will be outside and at play in the streets. Please like to remind everybody just to drive extra safe around kids. Thank you.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. Since our last meeting, the Port Hope Annual Civic Awards took place at the Capitol Theatre. I was happy to work with the committee and had the opportunity to help present some of the awards. Much thanks to the committee for reaching out and involving the youth councilors. Staff and councilors worked together to organize the Environmental Expo, including the cleanup of Municipal roads. Many youth had the opportunity to be involved in the event. The event provided many educational opportunities as well as activities, which were very youth welcoming. There was a great turnout of volunteers who stepped forward, and it was great to see Port Hope so environmentally involved. I spent much of the time at the expo at the Port Hope High School Environment Club booth, where we sold tulip plants that were grown in the Port Hope High School greenhouse to help raise funds for the up-and-coming environmental competition that Port Hope High School will be competing in. I had the opportunity to attend the annual Rotary Youth Leadership Symposium, where I got to spend 4 days in an interactive, welcoming environment at the beautiful Ganaraska Forest Center. During my time there, I got to meet lots of young leaders who traveled from across Ontario to attend the program. It was a wonderful experience. Port Hope is lucky to have such a wonderful Rotary organization. I attended the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting, where plans and ideas were discussed for the up-and-coming summer season. The Port Hope Saturday Farmers Market, which is located right behind Town Hall every Saturday from 8 to 1, has returned. The market is a great opportunity to come meet and shop from local vendors of all sorts. The market is a family, welcoming weekly event. The municipality's initiative to give more opportunities to youth can be seen through Youth Week, which took place a couple weeks ago. During the week, the municipality offered a number of activities and events that were directed towards youth. Some of the activities include drop-in gym, game nights, arts and crafts afternoons, and so much more. Thank you to the hard work from staff that went towards Youth Week. The 4th annual Goose Ball is taking place at the Fall Fair Center on May 30th. The Goose Ball gathers to celebrate art, culture, and community in Northumberland. This year's theme is Under the Sea. Be sure to check out more information about the Goose Ball on the Critical Mass website. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to open up to council. Does council have any questions or comments for the youth councilors today? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for your participation in the Civic Awards. It was absolutely wonderful to have you both a part of that, and it's nice to see our youth integrated into our ceremonies. I also love the fact that you contribute so much actually at the meetings themselves all throughout the year, so I'm looking forward to you continuing that for the rest of this year and to next. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, moving on to delegations. It is now time for delegations. We have 3 delegations on the agenda tonight. I would ask that all the delegates please be mindful of their time limits, as it is set out in our municipality's procedural bylaw. Please note that a bell will ring when you have 2 minutes remaining. So, moving on to 5.1, Mitchell Cohen, CEO, the Daniels Corporation, regarding From the Ground, a municipal movement to address housing affordability. And this is a virtual meeting, so I will now ask the presenter to please unmute their microphone and begin their delegation.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Pearson, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this meeting this evening. I'm hoping you can all hear me okay and see me as well. So thank you so much again. I am the CEO of a company called the Daniels Corporation. And we have been a real estate developer in the Greater Toronto Area for the past 40 plus years. But the focus of our work as a real estate developer has always been on the development of affordable housing. It is my personal background from the co-op housing sector back in the 1970s into the early 80s. When I joined the Daniels Corporation, a private sector company, it was to find opportunities to use the platform of our private sector company in order to create affordable housing. Fast forward many, many years, we have built thousands of affordable homes across the Greater Toronto Area. And very recently, we began to think about how we could play a role to stimulate the development of affordable housing literally across the country. The impetus for this came when Build Canada Homes announced their first proposal call back in October of last year. What we saw when we reviewed their proposal call was that they were looking for speed. How quickly can something get built? How dense can it be built? And how cheaply can it be built? And I guess we took exception. I took exception to that, thinking that there is more that we can do with public lands than simply build fast, dense, and for the lowest possible cost. You know, our company has been very involved in thinking through social infrastructure, in building beyond the bricks and mortar, and in working with nonprofit housing corporations wherever we are building. So we felt that there was an opportunity to approach municipalities with the notion that municipalities have a role to play in supporting and the creation of affordable housing. We can't simply wait for Build Canada Homes and the federal government to have all of the solutions come from the top, but in fact, it can also come from the ground. So over the past 6 months, there have been 7 mayors that have said that they will be founding mayors of this movement that is called From the Ground. And what has happened very recently, even since I submitted to do this deputation, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has embraced From the Ground as an important new piece of advocacy that they can be doing with the federal government. So in June, on June the 5th, coming up at their national conference, FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, will be inviting mayors from across the country to join this movement, which is simply to say that municipalities have land, and with that land, they have the opportunity to sell or lease that land to a nonprofit housing provider for $1. That is what is needed to kickstart the creation of affordable housing in any municipality across the country. So as mentioned, there are 7 mayors who have already become founding mayors. It would be wonderful if Port Hope, if all of you this evening were in accord with the notion that you have a role to play. Now, what I have seen in Port Hope, because I've had the absolute pleasure of being in Port Hope over the last year a few times, meeting a couple of the councillors. Hello to those of you that I've met. I was invited by a number of different people, including Northumberland Nonprofit Housing, Habitat for Humanity, and the Hope Towns Initiative. And what I've come to understand is that you have already gone down the road designating a number of parcels of land as surplus. That's the first step. And the second step is to say that one or more of those lands could be sold to a nonprofit in your jurisdiction. It could be to one of them. It could be to a consortium of several. That is what kickstarts the creation of truly affordable housing, not just affordability for the short term. And the federal government over the past number of years with their programs have, in my view, been too short-sighted. We need to create affordable housing that remains affordable in perpetuity. This is what From the Ground is all about. We're very hopeful that all of you this evening will take this away and ideally embrace this concept, this movement, to really say that municipalities have a role to play in addressing affordability across the country. It's as simple as that. We need all of us. We need a whole of community approach if we're going to truly begin addressing the crisis of affordability experienced by so many people across the country. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's all I have to say tonight. It's a pretty simple ask, and we hope that you will, take this away and ideally join this movement. We look forward to that.
Wonderful, thank you, and thank you for your delegation. I am going to open this up to council for any questions or comments. Councillor Les.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Cohen. What type of housing are you building?
Well, thank you for the question, Councillor. Every municipality will do what they think is what's needed for their local situation. Now, for example, Pickering, the mayor of Pickering, has designated a fire hall site, and that will likely take 40, 50 units, and they would likely partner with Durham Region Nonprofit Housing Corporation, who will look to their waiting list. They will look to their constituents in terms of what the requirement is for their municipality. The mayor of Burlington, the mayor of Mississauga, the mayor of Newmarket has identified, for example, in Newmarket, a 2.5-acre site. They're going to be designating that and selling that to a group called Blue Door, a nonprofit social service agency that also creates housing. That community will likely have some supportive housing for people who are making a transition from homelessness, but it'll also include a mix of market housing, affordable housing, and deeply affordable housing. So I think the key thing is that From the Ground has to reflect what is happening in your constituency, in your municipality. And it could be 3 houses, 10 houses, 20 units, 50 units. There's no real strict, the whole idea is to get everyone involved to say, we have a role to play. I hope that addresses your question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. And I just have one further question. And the developers you've been working with, are they a cross-section? Are they all representative of various areas? Is there any?
Well, the idea of the program is that each municipality will select a nonprofit corporation within their jurisdiction. So it could be a group in Toronto, for example, Yonge Street Mission. It could be a group in Newmarket, as I mentioned, Blue Door. So the key here is that the private sector can be the builder developer, but not the owner. This is all about building capacity in the not-for-profit sector, finding nonprofit agencies to say, It's a moment in time where you will have the opportunity to build capacity, to build equity, to work with the municipality, to look at waivers of potential development charges. So it really is between the municipality and the not-for-profit that you choose to work with. Private sector developers can be the builder, but not the owner. The private sector will build housing. What the whole goal here is to create opportunities for the nonprofit sector to create non-market housing, housing that remains affordable in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Less. Councillor Attridge.
Hi, Mitchell. Thanks so much for the presentation. It's good to see you.
Nice to
Could you give us a little bit more information on how being a founding mayor of From the Ground differs from, the municipality giving land to, say, Habitat in the fashion in which we're currently doing it?
There's no difference. You are already, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, well along the path to fulfilling what we're asking mayors across the country to do. Declare land surplus, allocate a piece of land or more than one piece of land to a nonprofit like Habitat, and support that nonprofit to create new affordable housing that remains affordable in perpetuity. What you coming on board with From the Ground, what it means is that it builds momentum. It ideally says we are part of a broader national movement. We in Port Hope are doing this, and others across the country ideally will pick up the mantle as well, grab onto some leadership here, and say, we can do what Port Hope is doing. And I totally appreciate, Todd, Councillor, that you are already there and moving towards this. It's, call it symbolic, call it building momentum, building a coalition of people who say municipalities have a role, and shouting it from the rooftops through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Holloway-Woodwani.
Hi, thank you. I think this is a wonderful initiative. Fully support it, and I really appreciate that it's, as you say, it's in line with sort of an approach that we've already embraced here as Port Hope. I know the recommended motion this evening is, of course, to receive for information. I would like to do something other than just receive for information, but at the same time, our mayor is not at the table with us today, and any motion that we might explore would be directing her. I think would require her buy-in, which I actually think exists, but we can't hear from her today. So I would like to suggest that rather than receiving for information, we refer this to our next meeting when Mayor Hankivsky will be back at the table, and we can have a conversation about crafting a motion to come on board at that time.
Okay, thank you. So is this the motion that you're putting down then?
Yes.
And do you have language from the clerk maybe?
That we refer the delegation to our next council meeting for further consideration.
Okay, I have a mover. I need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Attridge. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Appreciate your delegation today. And
Thank you very
have a great evening.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.
Moving on to 5.2, Faye Moore, Chair on behalf of the Port Hope Community Health Concerns Committee, CNL's Port Hope Area Initiative. If I could ask, already at the table there, so thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. So I'm here tonight representing the Port Hope Community Health Concerns Committee. You have in front of you, as of last week, a draft petition to the Auditor General of Canada that we've developed regarding nuclear issues in Port Hope. Some of them you saw in the November 25 letter that was sent to councillors. Some of these went to the Auditor General a couple of years ago on my behalf by the Canadian Environmental Law Association, and a couple are new and expanded. It's an opportunity for you to correct any mistakes that we might have in here, and also an opportunity for CNL as well to do that before it goes into a new government and the Auditor General for passing on to the relevant ministers to act upon. The final document will be available on our website, and probably by next week. So in the document, there are 5 issues, and there are 8 questions. It has to be in the form of questions when it goes to the Auditor General. I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to do a bit of a blizzard of words to try and get through the issues as best I can. So the first issue, number 1, really is about Bill C-226. It was passed in 2024, typo there, sorry. National Strategy Respecting Environmental Racism and Environmental Justice Act. And we are applying that to OPG's proposal for Wesleyville, which we believe contravenes this act, and we will be following up on that in the months ahead. There should be procedural justice, recognitional justice, and distributive justice in communities. And Port Hope already does not have that with the issues that we deal with. And we have a lot of concern about the loss of farmland that is potentially here, the impact on farmers. Right now, according to the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, there's a loss of 391 acres of farmland per day going on in Ontario. So there are a lot of infrastructure pressures on the county of Northumberland as well as on Clarington by a project of this magnitude. Issue number 2 goes back to what CELA represented me on going forward 2 years ago, and that is for the proactive disclosure of contaminated public property in Port Hope, which they still fail to do by their current policy. What I requested at the time was that there be an investigation of the fact that Dr. Power's school contamination was not disclosed publicly. The property I raised my family on was not disclosed to me by policy. And another example was Cabin Street. So those 3 examples were put forward as problematic that people use these properties not knowing that they have contamination on them. So to our knowledge right now, that policy still stands, that there's only disclosure if somebody asks or if there is work going on the property. Issue number 3, calling for a national public inquiry into the management of radioactive waste in Canada, starting initially with Port Hope. We have a new Prime Minister, we have a new cabinet, we have a lot of expansion being talked about of the nuclear industry. And right now, there are no permanent solutions for low, intermediate, or high-level waste in Canada. So there are temporary measures, there are experiments being tried, there is no solution. Issue number 4, request that the federal government conduct an audit of the current AECL CNL office and its lack of compliance with the legal agreement between Canada and Port Hope. And we have a number of concerns regarding how remediation is going. Starting in 2015, Natural Resources Canada divested itself of responsibility for the remediation of Port Hope. And it basically, it became what they call a GoCo, and Mr. Cameron can elaborate on that if you want. So there is a contract in effect. Natural Resources Canada is no longer responsible for the direct relationship. So what we have now, as of 2025, as we understand it, is largely a US-based consortium that owns CNL, and it's run as a business. So around that time, we started to see measures brought in that were looking at cost savings. So one of those examples is through the Special Circumstances Protocol, that over time was allowing people to opt out of remediation, which I can tell you was never the plan. Having been around through the beginnings of it all and read the legal agreement many times and talked to the politicians at that time. So the protocol also removed the municipal role with private property. This is over time, from 2015 to 2023. And what that meant was private property owners really didn't have anywhere to go but circle back to the CNL office. They did not have federally funded legal advocacy, which we argue they should have. They also had contracts that required a confidentiality, some of them did, that made them concerned about their liabilities if they even went to get a second opinion. So far as we understand it, 200 properties have been exempted from remediation. What is going to happen with the liability for those properties into the future? There are concerns that there are not peer reviews happening about the arsenic proposal for the cleanup criteria to be changed. There's a lack of involvement of the public, which was envisioned at the time very much so, and seen as critical to the success of remediation, that there should be a community advisory committee that was comprised of citizens, and they would be empowered, and they would have reports, and they would have input, and there would be official conversations going on with CNL and with council, and that is not happening and hasn't been for some time. So we have no way of getting these answers. Information is very limited, but what we do have is, from our knowledge, is that Health Canada has not agreed to the arsenic change. And they have been trying to get that changed for at least 7 years. So that should give you pause, that on a health-based reason, it is not a good idea. So one of the outcomes of an audit would be to really assess what Port Hope needs in the way of a budget, what CNL should be doing, what AECL should be doing to comply with the legal agreement, which was the commitment to the people of Port Hope to have future unfettered use of the land again, which was taken away from them through no fault of their own. So the next issue is health. To go back and really have an independent relook at the health studies that have been done, which do point to significantly elevated rates of diseases in this community in a number of different health studies. There are also recent studies that are relevant and important on the effect of uranium on the body and ionizing radiation. So maybe it's issue number 6. It's possible I didn't number these right. So that there should be federal compensation for the people of Port Hope. When you consider the budget that is proposed possibly for Wesleyville of, I think the calculation is around $250 billion, and that's in today's money. 10% of that amount has been paid out in the United States to downwinder communities, to workers in the nuclear industry for harm caused by exposure to ionizing radiation. Port Hope is one of the original downwinder communities. We've not had an apology, we have not had compensation, and we argue that it is time for that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your delegation. I'm going to open it up to council. Does council have any questions or comments? I'm seeing none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Holloway-Woodwani.
Hi, Faye. It's very interesting. I appreciate all of the work and that's gone into this, and certainly a heck of a lot of research on your behalf, on your part and the part of your group and your team. It's a bit of a mixed bag for me. There are certainly some things there that I think are really interesting, and I certainly am interested in sort of exploring and thinking about. Then there are others that I think where we definitely do have a different, I have a different perspective from you in terms of why things have unfolded the way they have. I think I wondered in your consideration of things like the special circumstances protocol, to what extent you had followed the work of other groups in the community who were, as you are, coming to council, advocating for a scale back of the scope of the project, for more owner-directed opportunities to protect trees being a big one, of course, in that. So you seem to link that directly to what you see as a cost-saving measure. But I wonder to what extent your analysis and the work of your lawyers has also considered the responsiveness factors to some other voices in the community that were raising different concerns about the project.
Well, there's certainly awareness of the Save the Trees group and the advocacy that they have put forward. To some extent, there's a sense that that relates a lot to property values. A lot of trees come down for housing. They're coming down for roads. I mean, look on Victoria Street. And that was, I think, where the original Save the Trees campaign started, was up around Penryn and the golf course. And, you know, and people felt very passionately about that, and genuinely so. So there's a property value component, I think, that's inevitable in Save the Trees. And again, that falls to the federal government to repair what they have to take down to fix the community. So again, there's the cost factor that it does save time and money to leave the trees alone. I don't know how you make the equation, and I look forward to seeing some studies or research that is trying to do that. As I think the mayor mentioned when I spoke about this about a month ago, and she said that Health Canada had not been tasked with, but was now looking at weighing the tree canopy issue with leaving arsenic in the ground. So for me, they don't go together. I don't see how those go together. The arsenic issue, the inorganic arsenic that travels in the ground, goes from one house to another, is there, versus the tree canopy. They're like two different issues. And I agree that people should be heard, and I think there should be careful environmental assessment going on of both pathways, both options. And I think it was always envisioned, and trees are mentioned in the original 2015 protocol, that there could be a circumstance, very singular, very rare, but there could be, where there could be a tree issue. But the wholesale using of tree canopy to leave arsenic in the ground for future generations is extremely fraught with deja vu. Haven't we been here before? I grew up in a contaminated house. I went to a contaminated school, played on a contaminated beach, ended up buying a contaminated house. And the purpose of remediation, all of that, is to stop that cycle. So how do we prevent future people? Do we have signs everywhere? Do we have deeds with notes on them? And how do we help neighbors that don't want that creeping onto their property? So, I mean, lead, arsenic, uranium, they're all extremely toxic, dangerous. Arsenic is no safe threshold. No amount of it is considered safe. So yeah, I hear the point that it has to be weighed, but I'm not seeing the research. And it does bring me to another point about the lack of information that is available to the public. And again, the need for good public involvement, sitting around a table, getting those reports from CNL, being able to question, being able to offer input and advice would go a long way. Thank you for asking the question.
Thank you. Councillor Less.
Thank you for your presentation. You gave us a lot of information to try and unpack in a very short period of time, and I'm not an expert at this, none of us are. But 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, when we had our committee of the whole meeting, we tasked our staff to help us work our way out of the situation of communication with CNL. And so we're waiting for that. That's not going to solve. It'll be a beginning to perhaps more dialogue, more solutions. And so I really can't comment any further than that. And you have some valid points.
That, and I know my colleagues do as well, that you're listening. And what will come back from this, and it's one reason to push it up, is that we want the federal government to take note of Port Hope. Remember us, we matter, the people matter. And we want a future here that is safe as it can be for everybody, undoing past mistakes. And our concern is that we're seeing it deviate. And that maybe because it's less of a public service remediation than it was before. Maybe Mr. Cameron can speak to that. I know in the CNL contract, it says that they prize public involvement. It's a priority to engage with the public. It's cheaper not to in terms of staff time, but it is supposed to be a priority. And what also is in there is cost savings. So again, we don't want to be that sacrifice for cost savings. Let's do it right and insist that it be done right.
Thank you. Councillor Attridge first.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and also I'm finding this very interesting. I want to dig in a little bit more on question 1 that you had around Bill C-226. So my understanding is IAC, or for those who don't know the acronym, it's the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, has taken in consideration Bill C-226 because they've recently changed some of their assessment or analysis, specifically around socioeconomic and health effects, as they, in particular, around Indigenous and racialized populations. Could you give us more on that? Like, what parts are missing in the C-226 from what you've done in your research?
I think our conclusion basically is if Bill C-226 is respected and applied, and we could be the first Canadian community where it is successfully applied, you consider that we have 2 Cameco facilities operating in our midst without buffer zones and with uranium emissions every day. And the Ontario Ministry of the Environment has said in 2010, when they were developing a uranium in air standard, that inhalation of uranium particulate is 200 times more biologically impactful than ingestion. So that is happening every day in Port Hope. And then we've been surrounded by 1.2 million cubic meters of radioactive waste, still at over 1,200 locations. How do you add the largest reactor complex in the world to that situation? In this geographic area, this small community, going into a beautiful rural area with farmland, with wildlife, with protected area, how does that even make sense? So withdrawal of the proposal would seem to be the most respectful solution if you truly are going to use Bill C-226 the way we understand it to be intended. They also speak in the bill about reparations. And that is something that we will build on. That right there, for the first time that we're aware of, there is a bill that talks about that. I have talked to lawyers over the years, and one of the very sad things I learned some years ago was how weak environmental legislation was in Canada to protect communities like ours. Port Colborne found out about that when they sued Inco, and they lost. Damaged property. They lost and had to pay Inco's legal bills. And so the foundation to make polluters responsible has been missing. And so this helps us go down that pathway, but it's still lip service unless they really take hold of what this environment has consisted of for the people for generations. And a lot of that, the people are missing. They're invisible. it becomes a technical thing, But there have been people that have grown up and lived here and lived through that and still want to live here when it's fixed and they have a beautiful rural community and it's on the chopping block. Why?
Thank you. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, this is more directed at our staff. Is there, because of the complexity, the amount of information, the fact that this is very important and will be an ongoing discussion for who knows how long, I'd like to not recommend that we receive for information, but I'd like a method to keep this open as a live file so that we could keep coming back and addressing it. Is there a way of doing that?
The CAO.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. I think that's the purpose of the CAC, and this is the discussion that we had last council meeting on the CAC. It was a fulsome conversation, as you pointed out, Councillor Andrews. It's the starting point to continue conversations, so I think that is the avenue, that is the venue. We keep in close contact and working with CNL and AECL to make sure we're managing the best interests of the community.
So that's preferred and you would like to see us receive for information?
From a procedural perspective, yeah, the preference would be to receive the presentation for information. As well, sorry, we also have the quarterly reports from CNL that will be tied into the CAC conversations.
Thank you. Faye.
I'm not sure from the answer whether the public will be involved in that or whether it will be council talking to CNL as was envisioned a little while ago. And I really, really hope that you broaden it out and to be inclusive. And I would like to be able to come back without jumping through a bunch of hoops. I find your bylaw on being a delegation, it really has, I don't know how recently you've looked at it, but I'm not supposed to come back and talk about the same thing again. Well, how can I not come back and talk about the same things again? They may be a bit different, and there would be an update from, hopefully, from the Auditor General's office or the ministers, but it's not that easy. And I would like to feel I can come back and colleagues can come and talk to you about these issues because we care about the community, and that's why we're doing it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
I think just to assure you on one front, I think your point about the recent discussions around the CAC were twofold. One, you hope it involves people that aren't council, but I think what you also said was that you want to make sure that it's not just council talking to CNL. And I think if you followed, and I know you were in the room when we had that special council meeting, we did very specifically talk about looking at taking it out of the delegation, the quarterly updates, and having potentially special meetings that are where we're wearing our CAC hat that could follow a slightly different format from these formal council sessions. So that may be an avenue to addressing the concern you've just raised, that there might be another forum, and I guess that's coming forward in July. So please stay tuned for that. I'm hopeful that that'll provide the kind of forum that you're talking about.
That would be great, and that is also really going down the path of opening things up more transparency. I think it is also important to be able to come to council. It is televised, it is recorded, it goes on YouTube. There is a record of that, unlike some of the committee work, which is very important, but it doesn't end up with the same result. So I hope that I can come back again. Multiple times. Thank you.
Appreciate, and we always love having the community coming and speaking to us about everything, so appreciate that. Anything else from council? I'm seeing none, so the recommended motion is to receive this delegation for information. If I can get a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Attridge, seconded by Councillor Toms. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to 5.3, Scott Cameron, General Manager, Historic Waste Program Management Office, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, CNL, regarding quarterly update on the Port Hope Area Initiative.
Good evening. Before I start, Faye Moore, thank you. I did not realize we had an opportunity to respond to your delegation, and we'll work through it because I do have some feedback for you. But we'll take a detailed look through that and work together and sort that out. A couple things I do want to clarify about the delegation that was ahead of me was one thing that was there was the waste issue in Port Hope is a form of environmental injustice, and therefore no future plans for new nuclear should be approved in Port Hope. It's the reason why Port Hope Area Initiative exists. Canada recognized and acknowledged its historic waste program managers have passed many, many years ago were no longer accepted in modern standards and agreed to do the right thing and address the historic waste. The signed 2001 agreement launched one of the largest environmental remediation initiatives in Canada. And history represents a very significant federal investment into this community. What I believe the 2001 agreement did not provide was a balance to what current social and environmental negative impact it's having on some of the Port Hope area residents' properties. I do have a couple other things, but Faye, I will take them offline and work together and sort them out. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, councils. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to update from CNL, Port Hope Area Initiative. Which I can't go back, can I? There we are. Nope. This is a current picture of the Port Hope Harbor. As you can see, the dredge is at the front. We are working steady to remove the wave attenuator, one of the last major operations to connect Lake Ontario to the harbor itself, as we work through the process and get ready to hand the property over to the Municipality Clarington. Well, that's a Freudian slip. That was this morning, wasn't it? Port Hope 2027. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that Port Hope Area Initiative is situated in the traditional and treaty lands of the Williams Treaties First Nations, and more specifically the Gunshot Treaty, negotiated between the Crown and Mississauga Nations in the 1780s, and is represented today by the Williams Treaty First Nations. I all want to recognize and acknowledge that these lands are home to Indigenous people of the province of Canada, and CNL is grateful for the opportunity to work on these traditional and culturally significant lands. Starting June 1st, we are working with the Mississauga Nations, the Municipality of Port Hope, and CNL. We have combined traditional knowledge and Western technology, and the progress on the Western Beach will start in the final restoration of that significant waterlands to their Indigenous partnership. And I'm losing my voice. Outlined today, there's three main areas presented tonight. Current planned work in the downtown area from 2026 to 2028 construction seasons. I want to highlight some feedback on private property tree removal and input from the recent roundtable. Oh, thank you very much. Current activities downtown, we have 5 active sites. 4 are private properties with 1 Port Hope area that's been merged into 1 site. That's a small road allowance. We didn't want to inconvenience that resident and go back the second time. Currently, 2 areas have been backfilled and 2 areas in a restoration. Parking impact has been minimized. Some permits have been surrendered to allow support for local business to set up for their patio season. We also have 18 properties that completed remediation plans that are ready for field work this summer. Our project leadership team has worked very closely with the HBIA, Chamber of Commerce, municipality staff, and we received direct feedback from the mayor and councils. Additional work in our downtown core for 2026 has been temporarily paused to allow for a deeper impact study by our staff. Our kickoff meeting is tomorrow with the general manager leading that. Our current activities that we complete over the next 2 months, there are no road closures to support this work, and access to properties and business will be maintained. For the 18 sites that we've paused within the downtown, we're building a strategy to see what we can progress without any impacts, minimum impacts to the area for 26-27. Part of that, there's 11 properties for 27-28 construction season, and they will also be evaluated and presented to this council at a further date. My main topic tonight is trees to continue to be a social media popular topic, residents for which I support the ongoing insights they provide me. However, as GM and as a resident, it bothers me to my core that a public challenge on decisions on people's private property are making into a public forum. Online campaign challenges can be directed toward the Government of Canada, CNL, the project, or even me as a general manager. They should not be directed to a private property or a person. Owners are making decisions on their property with the current options available to them under legal agreement. A positive example that I will use around social media is when I first became the Director General. You can tell where my next meeting is going. As General Manager, it was clear to me, and also a resident of Port Hope, that it was just not trees, but it was a tree canopy of all of Port Hope. I listened to the input, and one of the critical items I seen was the general feedback about saving trees in Port Hope. That was clear to me. It was a message from social media that my job was to make that a cornerstone of this project, which I have. And at the same time, I respected a private property person's decision to make a decision around that tree. Right? It's a family's decision, not a public forum to decide for that person. I understand the passion around the trees, the canopy, and Port Hope itself. But the challenge should be to the project, the rules we're bound by, the legal agreement that we work under, not a person making a personal decision for his or her family and their property. I will have an example where social media does feedback appropriately, and it's done with respect and due diligence. Current status for private properties, overall small-scale sites is in full swing for the 2026 construction season. CNL is working closely with our contract partners, subcontract partners, to try to minimize the impact to neighborhoods, communities, and residents. Residents are always welcome to contact CNL to get updates about their neighborhood. I and my staff have heard very clearly from the Port Hope leadership and some resident feedback. We understand that feedback is we need to look at smaller neighborhood updates. We can't speak to the private property that we're remediating, but we can speak to the impacts of those neighbors, right? CNL's taken that, and our CNL Publics team will be offering small neighborhood project updates in the very near future. Private properties, where are we overall? We're close to the finish line on all of our testing. Interiors, we have 48 properties to go, 121 exteriors, and 71 road allowances. Currently, in different levels of low-level reactive contamination, we have 265 interior properties, and about 1,200 external, and 187 roads. Where we are today for completion, 123 interior properties have been completed, and exteriors are 134. Currently today, we have finished 7 interior cleanups, and 19 exterior cleanups have been completed since February 2026. I've heard council, residents, clearly. We're working better in our communications. We always want to improve this. The next step that my team has taken, and I believe other nuclear industries will learn from this, working with the communities, is a resident roundtable. What they're telling us is frustration with timelines, transparency on work schedules, and prioritization of properties versus geographical locations. Properties owners experience, close. All right. Overall perception of the community is changing. It's safe and the public understand. People are also challenged with the financial impacts. These are taxpayers' money we're using. The liability for long term and property decisions by the homeowner. There's opportunity to improve the community engagement as we expand interiors. I do want to give an example where social media does, and I read them. There's a question today posted around properties and flooding or pooling. So far, there's been 4 claims, and we heard them loud and clear in 22-23. Here's what we put in place for this construction season. Outside of the structure concerns, we no longer demand a 95 compaction test on private properties. We're now treating these as green spaces, and have lowered that to a maximum 90 threshold through engineering. Contractors are looking at sacrificing or changing subgrade to help minimize hard pan transition from the topsoil, as per some of the Ontario building codes. Observations are ongoing for this summer. We've implemented a rain garden strategy on some streets to report and control some of the water. The ads found pictures, some of the grass was 2, 3, 4 feet tall, and is now nice grass. That water could or could have been there in the past. We've built rain gardens to support those residents, right? We're looking at changing the thickness of topsoils in some area for complete flat or non-grade areas. That's an example of social media ask a question that I can bring to this forum. That's the end of my presentation. I'll now open the floor for questions. I'll get a drink of water.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I'm going to open this up to council for any questions or comments. Councillor Clare.
Thank you.
If you smile, I know it's a bad one.
No, it's not. Maybe a little, but not on the first point. The first point is going to say it's amazing. Since May 5th, I've had a deluge of phone calls and emails and people reaching out to me. Personally, I'm sure my colleagues have had the same, so this might be a long Q&A. But I think just knowing, once residents sort of heard us publicly speak about the council functioning as a CAC, I think people have started reaching out to us even more than they were before. And I was going to raise this evening sort of 2 trends that I've heard, and I've visited a number of properties in that time as well in the last 2 weeks. The 2 trends being drainage and concern for tree growth based on compaction. So I'm thrilled to hear that update that you're adjusting the compaction levels. I think that's going to go a long way to get out ahead of some of those challenges that some properties have already had. The second one, though, is a bit different. So that was the good smile. The second one is, I'm curious to know, one of the other challenges that I hear repeatedly now as we've moved into the private properties is the confusion that residents are feeling about the work being done on their properties when their property lines are not at the sidewalk or at the road. So the sense that there's work being done on their properties, but they're really only party to the information about the part that they own. And the municipally owned portion of their front yard is not being shared, the information's not being shared with them on the basis of it being a different property owner. So I'm curious if you can explain whether the protocols you've put in place to protect the privacy of private property owners, are you using the same protocol to protect the information about municipally owned properties, including municipally owned boulevards that are people's front lawns, essentially? And is there a way for us to consider adjusting that? And what could that look like? What would you need from the municipality in order for your team to be able to share information about what contaminants are on the municipally owned portion and what the municipality's plans are for the remediation and restoration of those portions?
For the major projects, that has been released. That information is out there. For a boulevard that attached to a private property, we do try and keep that internal. It's the same policy. I will treat municipality property as public, especially around road allowances and stuff. But that sounds like a good CAO GM update to understand how we can get through that. I'd be more than happy with approval to share that information on property to property to property. But I think we need a protocol to have that in place. I think you just delegated to Lauren.
Thank you. Councillor Attridge.
Thanks very much. I've got a question, and actually I started the question with Lauren, but I want to finish it with you if I could, around the remediation of heritage properties and who oversees whether or not remediation impacts a heritage property. Are there permits that have to be made? And is it the property owner who comes forward first and says, I have a heritage property? Or is it the other way around where you're reaching out to see whether it's a designated heritage property first and then deal with it differently because of its features?
My understanding is that the project team does that research, works with the municipality, works with the municipal staff officers, and works together. So it's identified by the project team, validated through the homeowner. I do know some owners, as soon as we met with them, come very clearly what their designation is. But that's a whole process through there, including the property impacts. It will flag an historic building, will flag an engineering review, especially around the foundation and other areas through there. But it is significantly in-depth review.
And then who's monitoring that throughout to make sure that the heritage features are intact? Is that the property owner? Is that planning? Is it you folks? Is it a combination thereof? And what happens in the event that something is damaged?
So that's about a 4-step process in the integrated work plan that our contractors produce. I will talk either BIRD or WSB. It's built into their whole engineering plan. Part of the engineering plan and the design is going through with the homeowner about that designation. And there is construction with CNL that does have oversight, and there's independent oversight by the municipality staff that do come and tour, inspect what we're doing. And in the very unlikely that there is damage to historic property, that belongs to the contractor, and my job is to hold them accountable for that error.
Thank you. Councillor Last?
Thanks, Scott. I'm sensing that the spirit of cooperation is starting to increase between your organization and some of the residents. It's a great starting point. And I think that I always have this phrase, shadow of the leader. The shadow you cast is how your staff are going to interact with people. So I know I've talked to you personally, and I know what your intent is. So thank you.
I appreciate that comment. And what I have learned in the last 2 and a bit years as we moved for a major project was really, I would say, the center of that legal agreement with other primary properties attached to that legal agreement. And you look at the numbers now of 1,200 around testing that have some level. I find part of myself is not a general manager project, but a general manager to manage that impact. I'll end with where I began. The 2001 legal agreement was a right agreement, right license oversight, right everything for major projects. I think Port Hope got an amazing products that come out of that. I don't think there was a vision in 2001 of 1,200 properties. And part of my job as a general manager is to try and right-size that, balance the homeowner, balance the environment, balance the social impact, especially downtown. That message is absolutely clear. And to figure out what the new path forward is to right-size this project for the residents of Port Hope.
Thank you. Councillor Holloway-Woodwani.
Since it's not getting too late yet, I have one more. And that is, if you could, one of the other things that I'm hearing a lot is, I think, maybe different expectations among residents as around the role of their FLO, the field liaison officer, and what they can expect from that relationship and sort of the communication with them. I will say, and again, this is what I hear, so I'm looking for you for confirmation, a concern that the person who's charged with that information flow is not often coming to the actual site of their property, which is something that most residents seem to have an expectation would be happening. So I wondered if you could speak from the project side, sort of what is the intent of that role and how is that supposed to play out during the remediation of a private property?
For me personally, as a general manager, I'd almost put them in an advocate position for the resident to the project. Bring the concerns forward. There is a gap, right? We just had a brand new, Scott started 30 days ago. We did know we were short, so we do have one more new flow that's come in. The expanded of small scale sites expanded quicker than the flows. There will be some adjustments to how many properties we're doing in this year and relots some of those flows. And with the new person coming on board, we should get a little better. I've held those concerns myself, and they are a single point of contact, and they have an open floor to come to myself or Bill and see if they need help. And I've seen that a couple residents have reached out with concerns. I need to work a little bit closer with our contractors because a lot of times the flow is trying to drag it out of the project, and the superintendent's got 16 properties under his watch, and the first thing he's got to do is safety, then production. The flow comes third. So I do have to work with our contract partners. That is an area for improvement that I own.
Thank you. Anything else from council? I have a few for you. So first one is, like Councillor Clare, I've had a lot of extra residents in the last little bit that have been reaching out to me. So going back, and I've asked this question before, can you give me an update right now on the portal and where you're at on there, as this may be an opportunity for the private property owners to be able to just take a look at their own information?
Deputy Mayor, I'm going to guess, but I will turn to the person that owns it. Bill? Sorry, I'm throwing you under the bus. Could you come up to the portal?
Deputy Mayor, Council, Bill Daly, CNL, Communications. Yeah, so thanks for the question. Actually, it's a perfect time because residents should know or be looking out for mail within the next 2 to 3 weeks, as we're about to send out just shy of 1,000 letters to property owners so that they can access the portal. The background has been that we've had to take a swath of documents and everything else and move it into the system. So what we've done is, as I mentioned, I think last time, we have batches. So we're going to have the first batch now loaded up, and then we're going to send out those letters, get them working, get them accessing it, using it, and there'll be an interface within it so that they can actually communicate with us directly. So they'll see some documents. If there's something else they're missing, they can actually use the portal to ask us whatever they want. And then we'll continue to do that through the course of the year until everybody's on it.
Amazing. Thank you for that update. I really appreciate that update, actually.
Okay, I knew I was behind on that. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, just a couple extra questions. Earlier, we had a presentation from Faye Moore, and one of the things that was brought up in there were the arsenic criteria changes. Can you give us an update right now on where we're at on that, please?
The Government of Canada does have guidelines, and they've made it very, very clear that they're guidelines, and it's up to the CNSC that's in our license and MECP. I did issue a letter to the Deputy Minister requesting a response from our comments. We have received those comments, and Jennifer Turner has looked through there, and we've had those received. And I'm working with the ACL executive and the new executive team to further that. I would say it's at now the CEO level of engagement for the arsenic potential change.
And do you have a thought on a timeline still?
I do not have a thought on timelines because it's involved him, BPs, and our legal organization.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more question for you. What is your personal thought on the scope and the scale of this project right now?
Can I take a draw?
You may need it for this one. Yeah.
My personal thought. I'll answer it in 2 phases. First, I'll answer as a professional in the nuclear industry and run our major projects, dealing with hazards and others. In this case, is environmental. Listen to the panel of experts that I have working at Port Hope. We need to right-size the project. I think we need to take a look at the criteria that was set in 2001, reevaluate the impact. I think there was a vision and a carryover from the 70s and 80s and 90s that led into, in some cases, I hear both sides. I hear Faye, and I appreciate your response. I appreciate your challenge. I've also heard the other side is sitting and having a bear and telling me to get out of town. Generally, I think it goes too far on private properties. I think it was the right license. It was the right oversight. It was the right agreement for major projects. We have safely moved over 1 million cubic meters of radioactive waste from harbors and other areas. We have turned a Camatron Lagoon that was a bright blue into a park. You know, there was growing pains getting through that, but I think it did the right thing for Municipality of Port Hope. I think it's having a negative impact on a lot of residents. Personally, living in Port Hope, you know, I got coaching that I'm going to buy my groceries at 11:45 p.m. because it closes in 15 minutes. I don't. I go and listen to the residents. I think the residents generally are no longer fearful of what the 70s and 80s brought here. And I think it's time to listen to the residents as a whole. You know, I understand, I listen to the delegation ahead of us. I come from the nuclear industry. Those lessons have been incorporated. I tell you where they've been incorporated is Port Hope. We had the delegation of Saudi Arabia visit Port Hope on our environmental cleanup. They are now building a low-level storage facility in Saudi Arabia. They hired one of our best project directors, which I still a little happy, but they're benchmarking what we're doing for the nuclear industry going forward. So as a Port Hope resident, I think we're going to right-size this project and listen to the majority of the residents, because I think we have to find that balance. You know, I know some want us to cut every tree down, take every house down and reel it. I just don't see value for money. And as an ex-radiation protection manager, I don't see the risk. Some do, and I respect that opinion of them. Some may want me out of town. I respect that opinion, but I need to right size for the resident. I think that's my job as being a resident.
Thank you, appreciate that. So seeing nothing from council, recommended motion is to receive this delegation for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Less, seconded by Councillor Attridge. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving on to 6, public comment period. It is now time for public comment period. As per our procedural bylaw, the purpose of public comment period is for members of the public to provide comments on items that are on today's agenda. If you have any questions related to an item that is not on today's agenda, please wait until question period, and that is later in the meeting. I request that you keep your comments brief and respectful. I also remind council members that no questions or comments can be directed to those providing public comments tonight. If you would like to provide a comment, please approach the podium now and state your name, and staff will turn on the mic.
Faye Moore. I have several comments I'd like to make. First, with Mr. Cameron talking about the private property cleanup. The property that I raised my family in for 27 years, we had radioactive waste on the front lawn that we did not know about. It was discovered in a flyover with Gamma Bob helicopters 20 years prior. It was listed as about 20 times background gamma radiation coming out of that yard. Now, it appeared that the bulk of that was called municipal frontage, so it was not disclosed to us when I got our private property file. So when I asked for the file and I got it, you're lulled into a sense of security that your children who are laying on it, mowing it, playing ball, are not at risk. And that was not true. I found out about the frontage because of asking for the roads and frontages file. And there's a picture of my house and my front yard. I took that issue. I did not get a confirmation from the Port Hope Area Initiative that the property was contaminated because it was municipal. I took that issue to the CNSC. It was dealt with at a meeting, and the Municipality of Port Hope issued a letter to AECL and CNL, and they said, you've always had permission to disclose this information, that it's not on the municipality to tell people their readings, right? So on that issue, I think that Mr. Cameron is very wrong, that we do not want to leave the public living on top of radioactive waste. That has to be dealt with. I think the issue of people online being critical speaks to the lack of opportunity they have to get together, be well-informed, and make well-informed decisions, talk to each other. Neighbors are going to have a problem if someone does not want remediation done on their property because it travels. Am I done now?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, Sarah Sculthorpe. I'm fascinated by tonight's conversation about the health of our community, the cleanup of our community. I actually have the letter in my house from Brian Mulrooney saying that the federal government would clean Port Hope up. And the reason Port Hope was going to get cleaned up by the federal government was because the residents were very concerned that a private corporation would not be able to afford the cleanup. So that's how this all started. But we talk about the safety and the health of this municipality. And yet, we are facing the world's largest nuclear plant. And I don't know how many of you are aware of the AAZ. It's the Automatic Action Zone. Right now, it's somewhere around 3 kilometers. But nobody's ever built the largest nuclear plant. Some locations have up to 10 kilometers. And within that zone, you should not be building schools, you should not be building hospitals, you should not be building houses. This is the exit strategy if there is an accident. And here we are talking about our beautiful, clean community and our farmland, and we're going to plunk the world's largest nuclear plant in this community. And people in the town of Port Hope, I think they're safe. It's out of sight, out of mind. And it's not. This is in your backyard. And I believe this municipality really needs to think about it. And I went to the OPG presentation last week or the week before. They did not answer one question correctly, or that's the wrong thing to say. They couldn't answer our questions, and they have no idea what technology they're using. So how can we even go forward? Anyway, I ask Port Hope to think about what they're doing.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening. My name is Dale DiMatteo, and I would just like to address Mr. Cameron's assumption that this has been a safe cleanup, because we really don't know that. I'd also like to say I totally agree with what was just said by the speaker before this, everything she covered. The issue of safety of the cleanup means that you would have had to have conducted some kind of a health study to monitor what was going on. People were living in their homes throughout the cleanup. Debris, sand, dirt, everything could have been covered with all kinds of metals, contaminated material of all kinds. And there was no way to acknowledge that, no way to identify it, no way to monitor people's health, either by doing studies beforehand, during, and after, which should have been done. This would have been of international importance because there isn't much information on this, and that's one of the problems that we all face in making these decisions is that there isn't good information, although it's certainly coming forward in the last 6 months to a year, probably at a faster pace than before. So we do have greater information. But I do say we missed a terrible opportunity in this community, and out of a lack of respect for the health of the citizens in it, not to have done a health study, not to have monitored. We could have monitored blood, we could have monitored samples of urine, we could have done all kinds of things that would have indicated whether people were being exposed to something dangerous in this process. So I would say that we couldn't say that this is safely done. We don't know that. And that's a really sad aspect of this whole project, perhaps the saddest one of them all. Thank you.
Thank you.
My comment feels small in comparison to the last two, but regarding the flooding issue that Councillor Clare asked
Sorry, I
about.
apologize. Just state your name first, please.
D, hi. Benson. Regarding the flooding issue, as Scott Cameron mentioned, there were 4 properties who had claims in because of soil compaction. We know there are others who are commenting on the same boards about issues that they're having that you can see driving around town. My question is, with those changes, with those changes that are being made now, is that recognition that many were done in error and should have been done differently? And what happens to those 4 claims that went in that were summarily denied, for the record?
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Cameron Green, Port Hope. I just want to commend the council for really starting all this communication just recently. It's been great strides already, and I have to commend PHI as well, because even tonight they answered a compaction question that's just come up recently, so they're making an effort as well. So thank you very much. You know, when you hear Faye say that, you know, their group is worried about the health concerns, and Scott, and I appreciated him saying that he wants to right-size the project. And for us personally, we had to make a decision on our property, and we got rid of 2 60-foot, 50-year-old or more Norway spruces. We had to determine, is this a health concern, environmental concern? Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the wrong thing? I had to concern whether our property deed is going to be forevermore suggesting that we have contamination remaining on the site. And now suddenly we may be having special circumstances imposed on us for a reason that I never even considered. I won't get into it. But I guess I have a simple, maybe not a simple question, probably a complicated one, but a basic one. I hear Faye's concerns. And I heard PHI, and PHI I look to as experts, and I look to them for expert information. And I heard there was a presentation to industry professionals, I think in the Pacific Northwest. And they said that this is not an environmental issue. It's not a health issue, but it's a stigma on the town that had to be addressed. So I'd like to hear, you know, an official declaration combined from council and PHAI. What problem are we dealing with? Is it a stigma? Is it a health issue? Or is it an environmental issue? Or is it combined? And a clear statement, so then I can make decisions that we need to make.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment. Are there any other comments from the public? And just as a reminder, this is comment period, not question period.
I hear you. Okay, I am very confused. We have one delegation saying that it's very, very dangerous. We have another delegation now calling it, instead of a health issue, it's now an environmental issue. What confuses me the most is, what are we talking about, okay? LLRW, low-level radioactive waste, or whatever they're calling it now, seems to me has been split up into a couple of different things now. Are we chasing arsenic all over the place? Is arsenic dangerous? How dangerous is actually the arsenic? Does the LLRW move? Or is it just the arsenic that moves? I think there's a lot of questions that I hear from people that don't understand the actual problem. Like, what is it? If it's a health issue, how come the guys that are in the pits aren't wearing hazmat suits? Okay, that's a legitimate question that people have. If it's so dangerous, why are those guys not wearing hazmat suits? If it's not dangerous, why is it being done at all? I would just like to have some kind of clarification, some kind of notice of what exactly are we dealing with when you're talking about contamination? What is being cleaned up? What is being left? That's all I would like to know.
Thank you for your comment, Ed. Are there any other comments from the public?
Faye Moore. I'd like to just comment on Mr. Cameron's comment about the legal agreement. If I understood him correctly, he was saying that the way they're looking at doing things now is compliant with the legal agreement. They're going back to the legal agreement. There are ways in which you don't clean up the private property. And certainly our experience with that at the time and our read of that is very different. The wording is very clear that Port Hope was to be able to use all property for future unfettered use unless it was agreed upon between the municipality and AECL-CNL on special circumstances rarely applied. So what I'm hearing is Mr. Cameron and the company have come up with a different sort of criteria for delineating and leaving more private property in the ground and considering that compliant. And we don't think that is compliant, and it's a concern. And that is something that is at the heart of the issue of the future and the liability for the municipality, for property owners that do not get the property cleaned up. So that's something we can also talk about ourselves. I'm happy to meet with Mr. Cameron, with people if he would like to do that, but I think it is not consistent with the legal agreement to make that claim and the history. And again, talking about right-sizing the project, smaller, cheaper, faster for them. But the end result is not going to bring Port Hope to where it was supposed to be put after all this federal money is spent. Taxpayer money coming in here, what are we going to be left with? Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Are there any other comments from the public? Yep, just come up to the mic.
Good evening. Diane Taylor. And my property is due to be remediated very soon, within days. And it's going to be very trying mentally and emotionally for me because properties seem to go on and on and on. And I'm wondering if it is really necessary to have co-op students. There will be 2 co-op students during restoration and 2 highly informed individuals who will keep an eye on the co-op students who do the restoration. And it seems to me that co-op students are prolonging the whole process for everybody. And so there's my question. Could we, and even could I, turn down co-op students?
I appreciate. Are there any other comments from the public? I am seeing, one.
Sitting too long. Anyway, I just like to pick up on a couple of comments.
If I could just remind you to state your name for the record, please.
Yeah, Bob DiMatteo. Anyway, I just wanted to, say that more and more studies are coming in, being published in peer-reviewed journals, we kind of monitor that stuff because that's what we did for a living. And from what we are beginning to see, is a trend that's showing that if you live near a reactor, your chances, particularly if you happen to be a pregnant woman, if you happen to be a child, you may have some compromised, immune compromised state that puts you at much greater risk, of dying of occupation of cancer. That's what the journals and the researchers are saying. Now, I think Faye's mentioned it, and so have others, is that there's been no research done on this. It's just beginning to come out now. Epidemiology, the science. It's really kind of a body counting exercise. But the thing is, it gives us better indication of what's happening to the health of large collections of individuals. So anyway, I think that what we have to look at is designing. Even if you can do it at just hire a whole bunch of good academics, independent of the nuclear industry, that reviews all the journal stuff, the journal articles that have come out in the last, let's say, 30 years. And you'll find that it's frightening. And if you start looking at the actual, instead of just body counts, if you start looking at other features of the research, that's even scarier.
Thank you, Bob.
So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. This now concludes our public comment period, and we will be taking a 5-minute break. We will return at 8:12. Moving on to item 7, consent agenda, approval of minutes. Items listed under the consent agenda are considered collectively as one motion. Council members may request that specific items be removed for separate discussion, deliberation, and action. The consent items are listed on the agenda. Would any member of council like to remove any of these items for separate discussion? I'm seeing none, and if I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Les, seconded by Councillor Toms. All in favor? And that has been approved. I would request that everyone out in the hall please keep their voices down, please. Thank you. Moving on to 8, consent agenda, advisory committee and board meetings. Would anyone like to remove any items under the consent agenda for separate discussion? I'm seeing none. If I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Les, seconded by Councillor Toms. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Moving on to 9 items for consideration. There are no items for consideration tonight, as report DS 0826 was withdrawn to allow for further review. Moving on to item 10, consent agenda, committee reports and recommendations. We have a consent agenda for the committee reports and recommendations. Council has the ability to pull an item under the consent agenda if they want to consider it separately. Any item removed would be addressed following the consent agenda motion. Would council like to remove anything? I'm seeing none. If I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Attridge. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Moving on to item 11, notice of motion. We have none. Moving on to item 12, bylaw consent agenda. Does anyone have anything that they would like to pull for a bylaw? Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I'd like to pull item 12.3, please.
I apologize, 12 point. Does council have anything else that they would like to pull? Seeing none, okay, so we will address for the consent agenda 12.1, 12.2, 12.4, and 12.5. If I can get a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Toms, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. We will now move back to item 12.3, 2026, prohibit and regulate encroachments on public highways and other public lands within the municipality. And I will ask Councillor Claire to speak to that, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to pull this one separately for a separate vote, just because I'm still struggling with this one. I really, really appreciate, and I will speak again, I really appreciate the collaboration and the collaborative approach that the manager of bylaw has taken with me in addressing one of the concerns I had about the bylaw. The second concern, which was the sports equipment piece, the second concern, though, relates to the delegation we had from the Environmental Advisory Committee last month, and some concerns around, I think, unintended impacts of this, along with a few other bylaws with respect to limiting what people may feel they are allowed to do on their lawns and their yards. And I understand the intent to address those concerns through a separate policy that would outline essentially non-enforcement of some of these clauses with respects to naturalized yards. And I do take that in good faith, but having not yet seen that policy and been able to understand it and consider whether that does solve the issues that we have raised with respect to those limitations, I'm not sure that I am sure that I am not comfortable passing another bylaw that would be further restricting people's use of yards and moving towards more naturalized opportunities. So that's why I wanted to pull it, and I just wanted to explain that, especially to you, Manager Chatwell. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate. Are there any other comments? Councillor Less.
What part don't you agree with?
Councillor Claire.
So it was outlined in the Environmental Advisory Committee's delegation with recommendations. There's clauses, and was very specifically outlined in the attached document. There were a number of clauses in this bylaw that could be interpreted as applying to things like trees or landscaping options, rain gardens, things like that, if they were encroaching on the municipally owned portion of people's yards. And those are things that are very clearly outlined in our climate action plan as things we want to be encouraging people to do. We have other bylaws like the Clean Yard bylaw that has a preamble saying that in policy language that we encourage residents to choose more naturalized options. So I think until I can see how an additional policy that would clarify how we apply those bylaws with respect to yards and naturalization, I'm not comfortable passing another bylaw with those restrictions. And if I could further just say, I think it's, to me, I think starting to feel a little bit like a pattern in terms of how we're addressing bylaws, where we're using very broad restrictions that could be really open to interpretation when we're trying to solve very particular cases. And I'm not sure on balance if I'm comfortable with that approach in terms of balancing the impact on the community as a whole versus and the needs for enforcement. So it's something that I'm sort of wrestling with around bylaws overall.
We did have an occurrence at our last meeting on another subject, ARUs, and how generalities were passed without a whole lot of thought. Without a whole lot of thought about height and parking and things like that. And I guess we have to retrace that. But if that generality could pass, then why can't this generality pass?
Appreciate your thoughts. Does the manager of bylaw would like to speak at all of this before we move to a vote?
Basically, I've spoken on this at several meetings so far, and there's really nothing more to add. If we don't pass the encroachment bylaw, the downtown patio policy doesn't go through. The patios stay the same, the bylaws stay the same, and we have nothing to be able to enforce for road occupancy permits, stuff on our roads. So I'll leave that in council's hands.
Thank you. Appreciate. So with 12.3, I would need a mover and a seconder for that. Do I have Councillor Attridge, seconded by Councillor Less. And I will now call the vote. All in favor? And those opposed? And that has been passed. Moving on to 13, question period. It is now time for question period. Remember, the purpose of question period is to make inquiries of council members related to matters of municipal business. Please note, this is not meant to be an avenue, not meant to be an avenue to ask questions of staff. If you have questions specifically for your council members, you can ask them now. Council is happy to speak to decisions, policies, and priorities, the why. I also want to highlight that if your questions are operational in nature, the how and the when, they will be best answered by a member of staff. So following the meeting, contact information for our senior leadership team is available by the door. If you have operational questions, please ensure you contact them. At this time, I'm going to give staff 2 minutes to leave the room before people are able to come up for questions. Thank you. So this is time to come up to the microphone. Just please identify your name, and our staff will turn on the microphone for you.
Hi, Cameron Green, Port Hope. I use the public comment period for question period, so I'll ask the question now. I believe PHAI is of the opinion that the cleanup in town is going on to eradicate the stigma on the town. Does council have a formal opinion as to whether we're attacking a stigma, an environmental issue, or a health issue?
I appreciate the question. I'm going to open up to council. Does council have anything that they would like to add to this, or any answer?
And I don't want to put you on the spot, so if Todd first.
And yet you have.
I was just trying to let you go.
Sorry, Councillor Attridge, did you have? Thank you.
Sure, I don't mind tackling that one. To be honest, I think it depends on the resident. I think we're actually dealing with all three. I've certainly heard about that from all three, and for some people this is absolutely a health issue. In others, it's absolutely an environmental issue, and still there's some with stigma. So I think from a council point of view, one of the things that we always try and do is balance all three, because we're listening to the residents of Port Hope who are worried about all three. Not necessarily any one individual may be concerned about all three at any given time, but certainly as a collective, all come forward at some point. So I think that's the best answer I can give you right now, is that we are balancing the entire portfolio and have been for, well, not us, but council has been dealing with it for decades. It may have shifted over the decades as well. It may have started in one spot and moved, but I think we've evolved to this spot now where residents are concerned from multiple fronts, and there may even be a fourth or fifth out there as well.
Yeah, and sorry, Claire. You're right in tune with the community and right in tune with me, all three, and I try to make decisions, and I'm making decisions on all three, which are complete opposites, but I have to come to one decision. And so, and like I say, PHAI, I look at as for the expert opinion. And so when they say that it's attacking a stigma and it's not attacking environmental issue and not attacking a health issue, then I'll address my questions to staff based on it being a stigma and the decisions that are made that I disagree with based on that. And if it's a health issue, then I have to take that in consideration when I have my questions and decisions that I make. So I think if PHAI, and I think that they're unequivocal in saying that they're attacking a stigma.
Thank you.
As the experts.
Cameron, I'm going to let some other council members answer the question first. Councillor Clare first.
I will say, I think, officially, certainly in official documents about the project, it is billed as an environmental cleanup, not a health cleanup. So, I think that's important in terms of sort of framing that question and the answer to that question. But I think for me personally, I see it as an environmental health project. And I think, to the back and forth exchange after the delegation earlier, saying those things as separate to me is an error, because they are inextricably linked. In fact, if you look at the list of contaminants that we are cleaning up through the project, many of those contaminants are there because of the risk they pose to vegetation growth, not as a risk they pose to human health, right? And so that's another, it's showing how they are linked, and even in the list of contaminants we're looking at. So for me, I think we're looking at it from both perspectives, but I think it is important to recognize that there is no documentation that says that there is a health risk. I appreciate the questions, and maybe there's emerging research. I appreciate that they're probing around that, but to date, there has been no body of any level of government that has said that there is a risk to human health here in Port Hope in this phase of work that's covered by the PHAI. I won't go way back into the past to the original cleanup that was done of those other major sites, but for the PHAI itself, it is billed as an environmental cleanup.
I don't want to take up too much time here, but who should we listen to for a definitive answer? Would it be your opinion? Would it be PHAI? Is there someone else? Who makes the definitive answer?
Please don't take my opinion. My opinion, I'm just regurgitating what I've read from the experts.
So I take PHAI's.
And the official documentation.
Yeah, so two things. So I don't want to take too much time, but we'll have a conversation another time. As you feel it's an environmental concern, and I'd appreciate that. And I wonder.
Thank you. Mr. Green, I'm just going to give Councillor Less an opportunity to answer the question.
Councillor Less, I didn't see.
Thank you.
Yeah, quite an interesting question, but if it was a health-focused thing, then the attitude around town would be a whole lot different than it is now.
Right.
And if you went in a pecking order, health, vanity or stigma, and then environment, in that order is how people would rank things, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I guess one question I'd ask is for council to interact with PHAI and come up with a definitive explanation of what it is that we're dealing with. Is it a stigma? Is it environmental? Is it health? If it's only stigma, we'll have questions about special circumstances and things that are applied to properties based on that, and decisions that people have to make to remove old trees on their property, to not have that paperwork when it's only a stigma. And if it's an environmental issue, how concerning is that as environmental? Does it reach the level of concern that we have to remove old trees and we have to put information on people's property and make them make that decision? And if it's not a health issue at all, let's get that off the table. And then we can have the discussion, and we've got a starting point. Right now, like Councillor Todd says, we have all three positions as a starting point. So I hope that council will make a formal declaration along with PHAI.
Thank you, Mr.
As to what we're dealing with. Okay.
Appreciate. Any other questions?
Hi, Ed, White Mill Street. Okay, Councillor Clare, that's the first time in all the years that I've been interested in PHAI and what's going on that I've heard that some contaminants are being removed because they're a problem for vegetation. I've never heard that before. That's.
I'm sorry, Ed. What is your question for Councillor Clare?
Okay, my question, in the form of a question, Alex. How much of the cleanup is for vegetation?
Let me clarify. What I said was in the legal agreement, the soil contamination table, the standards for contamination that are being used for the project, they're from the Ontario. They're the Ontario standards.
Standards for
soil contamination.
For soil contamination.
Yeah. And some of them, boron being an example, the reason the level was set at what it is because higher than that, it poses a risk to vegetation growth. So soil that's contaminated with boron might not support trees growing, for example. So I'm saying that it's not that the project is being done to protect vegetation growth. It's that the standards that we've adopted for the project have been determined not solely based on human health, but also on environmental factors. So if that's the underpinning standards that we have selected, I think we need to be honest that they are linked, that some of those standards are there, but are set by the Ontario government to protect human health, and some of those soil contamination standards have nothing to do with human health at those levels, but are also around supporting a healthy environment at that level. So it was making the point that those two do go hand in hand. So says the Ontario government's soil contamination standards.
Thank you, Councillor Clare.
Okay, then I would like to ask a question then of council. Can you guys help me understand what exactly the contaminants are? What are the risks? Because I think there's a lot of people who don't understand what's going on. Is there some way that the residents of Port Hope can ask council to get us an answer of what exactly are we looking at? Now, we're talking boron, we're talking arsenic, we're talking tritium, we're talking all kinds of different things. A lot of people don't understand the flow, what moves, what is the contamination, how far down is it? I asked a question today of somebody who's supposed to know, and they don't know how far down the level of contamination is.
Thank you, Ed.
I think as a council, could you somehow come up with some paper that you can mail out or something that would be a little less confusing?
Yep, thank you, Ed. I appreciate the question, and it is definitely something that we can take back, as we are not experts in everything.
No, I don't think you are. I
so-
think you're
so-
probably as confused as everybody else is.
I appreciate. So I think that is an opportunity for us to maybe look at that, and maybe we can have that addressed.
Well,
in
the help
future.
would be appreciated if you could do it.
Greatly appreciate that, Ed. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the public? I am seeing none. So we are moving on to item 14, confirmatory bylaw. It is now time for the confirmatory bylaw. This bylaw confirms the proceeding that took place this evening and provides a formal adoption through a bylaw. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Less, seconded by Councillor Clare. All in favor? That has been passed unanimously, and I'm at a position to adjourn this meeting at 8:33.